My name is Hillary Evans, and I'm Executive Director of After Eight to Educate. And before jumping into our program, I'd like to reflect on three themes this morning. Gather, give, and grow. And I want you to think about these words in the context of supporting and sheltered youth. Gather. You may be here representing a school district or a city, or you might be a representative of a foundation or a service provider already providing services to youth in crisis. Or you may be someone who's interested in the issue of youth homelessness and wanting to help. In whatever capacity that brings you here today, we are gathered as a community, and together, our power to influence positive change is great. Give. We're entering the season of giving. Most of us will sit down in a few days and give thanks for our blessings, which will then be followed by a turkey and stuffing induced coma. You may also give to people in need. Give to the youth in our city who are without a stable home, without food, clean clothes. Giving without limits matters and makes a difference. And we greatly welcome you to give of your time and your resources and other ways to support After Eight. And the last thing, grow. After Eight to Educate launched 7 months ago in May. And have we figured it all out yet? No. And are we working towards supporting a critical need in our city? Yes. And we cannot do it alone. So gather, give, and grow with us so that we can make our efforts a reality for the youth who need us most. Now for the program. We're going to have a few important introductions first before diving into our dynamic discussion with After Eight partners. And then we'll wrap up with how you can engage with After Eight and also share some other important news and announcements. In just a moment, I'm going to be introducing Tony Fleo, CEO of Social Venture Partners Dallas. After Eight to Educate is being powered through SVP Dallas, and SVP Dallas is providing the infrastructure and capacity support for our startup organization. Tony will then introduce Jorge Baldor, the visionary and founder of After Eight to Educate, and he also goes by the name George. So if you hear me refer to him by both names, don't be confused. I would not be in this role and a part of this extraordinary effort if it weren't for both Tony and George, and so I give tremendous thanks for that. George is a brilliant entrepreneur and is the visionary behind After Eight to Educate. He will be sharing more about the genesis of After Eight and the vision behind it. He will then introduce Mateo Magdaleno, who will share his incredible personal story of overcoming adversity, mirroring the adversities and sheltered youth in need of our support. Mateo will also be our moderator this morning for today's conversation with After Eight partners. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Tony to provide some opening remarks. Thank you.
Good morning and welcome. And my name is Tony Fleo, and I serve as the CEO of Social Venture Partners Dallas, and we are so privileged to be leading this collaboration and this collective impact project. As you know, if you've ever tried to collaborate with anyone, perhaps you're married and you've tried to make a collaboration in their work, you know how very, very difficult that is. And there's a lot personally invested in that to motivate it, but imagine, if you will, how difficult it is to do collaboration projects between organizations that have their own mission, their own self-interest, their own purpose, their own donors, their own marketing teams. It is quite extraordinary when it can happen. We are holding this here today because the United Way is an anchor in the Better Together Fund. And the Better Together Fund, along with the Leidy Hill Foundation, the Meadows Foundation, and the Dallas Foundation, are moving our community forward in ways around looking at different options for collaboration and collective impact projects. We are looking at this as a collective impact project We are so honored to be playing a leadership role in it, and we are merely the institution that is driving it forward from a capacity and a structure perspective. We are not the experts in any of this arena except how to bring projects to conclusion. We are so grateful to Hillary for her expertise, her brilliance, her leadership. You have done an extraordinary job, and we owe, the whole community owes you a debt of gratitude for how well you have done this. So thank you, Hillary, for that. Also, for those of you that don't know much about Social Venture Partners, we are an organization where men and women come to us in order to have greater impact with their talents and with the dollars that they can provide in the community. I am so proud that George Baldor is a partner at Social Venture Partners and has come to us. He is more than capable of doing this project on his own, but he was kind enough and gracious enough and acknowledged that the possibilities were greater if he joined forces with some of our other partners, some of our other institutions, to make this successful. It might take a little bit longer to get done, but we believe that doing it in community with other leading organizations will get it done in a much better way. So without further ado, I am so proud to and so honored that George Baldor is part of Social Venture Partners and is the inspiration behind this project as it stands today. And so I'd like to bring George to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for being here this morning. Tony, for your kind words and the inspiration from Hillary. We appreciate putting this together. All of us that have been working with Hillary throughout the last probably 4, 5, 6 months know that Hillary is the glue that has us here this morning. So thank you for that. A few years ago, there was an article in the Dallas Morning News about the homelessness in high schools at the ISD, and the number touted was about 3,500. And so this is a number that kind of stuck with me. Thought about this over the last couple of years and kind of made a few inquiries, got sidetracked on a few things, and then this spring there was another article that was talking about the same concern, and the number is still 3,500. So that really led me to ask, why we as a city are not doing more about this. We are excited about all the new skyscrapers and all the new businesses and all the new opportunities that are coming to the Dallas area, but somehow we forget to look at the street level and below the street level at the bridges and the people that are living under those bridges, particularly those that are going to school and facing those obstacles and still a part of that. We as a community need to do better. We are better. And so in getting together with some civic leaders, organizations, people that have been in this space over the last few months, we've been really fortunate to meet with the ISD, and under the leadership of Trustee Bernadette Nuttall, we were able to identify a vacant elementary school that is in the Fair Park area, that is a perfect location, which is close to Dart Rail and Dart Bus. The building's in good, sound, physical shape. So it's a perfect location to be able to put together the shelter facility and also the 24/7 drop-in facility that we've been working to collaborate to make this happen. The first battle has been really to get through and get the approval for the building, which about a week and a half ago, the ISD trustees trusted us with this with an 8-0 vote, and we appreciate that unanimous support. That speaks to, I think, their commitment to making Dallas a showplace for how to solve the issue of youth homelessness. And so collaboratively, I think this is an effort that we're going to have a program that is easy to replicate. It's something that can be taken as an example throughout other cities throughout the country, because Dallas is not alone in facing this crisis. But it's going to take the second phase, which is raising awareness, and awareness means dollars. So it's going to take all of us and all our Rolodexes to make this project a reality. We are here in this building today to celebrate the collaborative efforts that United Way has provided over the many, many years in the past, and their commitment going forward, particularly with the Big D Gives initiative that starts on November 28th. I'd like to announce that I will be donating a matching fund of $250,000 starting on November 28th. Please join me in getting your groups, your networks, your Rolodex, and let's make this a reality for Dallas, and let's make this a reality for the students that are in need of a helping hand so they can finish their education and change the trajectory of their lives so that they can also be in this room one day and be doing the same thing for someone else. It's a great privilege to be able to introduce Mateo today, and Mateo's a personal friend, and in fact, 3 years ago, when this issue first came to my mind, he was one of the individuals that I went to really, I found out that the story that we're discussing today is his own personal story. This is his experience, and so that's always been inspiring to me to see what potential he's been able to reach because of it, and to know that others are also going to be able to do the same thing. I could spend probably the rest of the morning on Mateo's bio, so I'll just make it real quick. Mateo's an international public community servant and empowered speaker. He is stressing the importance of never giving up and the importance of education. He has a powerful real-life narrative that inspires and motivates his audience, and has been part of Reconciliation Outreach and accumulated over 30,000 hours of community service since the age of 13. He earned the Congressional Award Gold Medal, which is the highest civilian award given by the United States Congress. Through Reconciliation Outreach, he has raised over $5.8 million for a Greater Dallas nonprofit called The Refuge, which is a shelter for battered women and children since 2001. He was voted the 2010 Miller Coors National Latino Leader of the Year and the 2010 One Man Dallas. He's been featured on CNN, NBC, and Univision's Don Francisco Presenta show. He's currently pursuing a academic study so that he can continue his education with a doctorate of education from Harvard Graduate School of Education. Please join me in welcoming him in. Thank you.
Magdaleno, would you welcome Raul, please? Good morning,
This is a story that really needs to be explored. Education has opened up so many doors for me, has empowered me.
Y recibe esta medalla del Congreso de los Estados Unidos.
And it was meant to pause right there because I was meant to tell you the rest of my story. That was a cliffhanger. Good morning, everyone. I know it's a Monday morning. I know it. I feel your struggle because the struggle is real this morning. You know, first of all, thank you to George. I also have the same thing, Hillary. I want to call you Jorge because the brown in me wants to come out and just call you Jorge. But thank you, George, for being an incredible visionary and someone who I consider to be a friend and a mentor. So thank you, George. Thank you to Tony and Hillary also for being the ones to execute it and saying, all right, let's take this vision and let's turn it into a reality. So, can y'all hear me by the mic? I'm gonna put my country voice on. Is that all right? All right, awesome. So I promise not to do to you all what I did about 2 weeks ago, and Dr. Francois was there too. And somebody said, were you ever a preacher? And I said, no, I never was a preacher. Why? Like, because you had 3 closings. But I was raised in a Pentecostal church where, some of y'all, can I get a witness? Okay. Where you kind of just go until the Holy Ghost hits, right? And so, like, you may be there to the next day. So I promise not to do that with you all, okay? And for that, please keep me 10 minutes. 10 minutes, because I get really excited when I talk about something that I'm extremely passionate about. So instead, I'm going to try to condense it to when I was 19 years old. And how many of you all have ever been asked this question of, who do you think you are? ¿Quién te crees? I'll just raise a hand, just show me how many of y'all have ever been asked that question. Oh, who do you think you are? You want to be a teacher? Well, you know they don't make any money. Oh, on and on and on, right? So that's a question. Maybe it wasn't phrased in that, but they said, you crazy. You want to run for office? What? You crazy. Right? Whatever it is, whatever your dream is, there will always be people that say that, who do you think you are? And so that was asked and told of me when I was 19 years old. I had joined forces with, I was the first member of my family to graduate, and I had this crazy idea. You see, I had this idea of I would somehow, some way, create this shelter for a battered woman. Because when I was between the ages of 8 and 13, I remember living with my mother underneath Haskell and Highway 30, when my mom would get beat again by my stepfather. And there I was underneath that bridge with my sister Sylvia, who is gifted with Down syndrome, and my mother. And I made a promise when I was that little kid. And I remember it was actually around November where I was freezing to death. And there I was, just crying my eyes out, saying, one day, God, if you give me the opportunity, if I ever make it, I promise that one day, I didn't even know what a shelter was. It was, when I grow up, I'm going to build a home for women. And so that kept going, and that dream just continued to develop. And so when I was 19, that dream was about to come true, because I said, nothing is going to stop me. So when I was 19 years old, I decided to join forces with Reverend Dorothy Moore, this debutante from New York, and this little brown kid had an idea of building a shelter. And everybody like, little boy, who do you think you are? Do you know how much it costs to build this shelter? Do you have any idea? And I said, do you have any idea who I am? Okay, I'm sorry, it's about to go down up in here, hold on. I said, you must not know my why. Because sometimes your why has to be greater than your how. Yes. You see, my why was so great that I remember that little kid when I was 8 years old, and I remember my why. I remember the why, my purpose. And so here I was 19 years old, and I had all the haters say you'll never make it. There's no way that you're going to be able to raise $500,000. You are too young. You are too brown. You don't even know how to fundraise. And I said, you know what? I may not be able to do all of that stuff, but I know my purpose in life. And number two, nobody knows how to work hard like me. Can nobody beat Mateo, Raul, Magdalena on how to work hard? It's going to take more for you to tell me no, that I'm not going to make it. So there I was, 19 years old, and I knocked on the first door, and they're like, I'm sorry, you want to do what? And I said, it's all right. I'm going to keep on knocking. I'm going to keep on knocking. And then I kept on knocking until somebody said yes. You see, sometimes we give up when the first person says no to us. But some of y'all like a great, you tell it, baby. Like, you got to keep on knocking till somebody answers. And then it was the Meadows Foundation that answered and said, of course, let's do it. So not only did we purchase that one shelter called the Refuge, we ended up purchasing the whole block. We shut down the crack houses down Peak and Bryan. Some of y'all how many of y'all like Dallas natives have been here for a long time? Oh, so y'all know before it got all pretty, y'all know, like people were scared, even the police are like, So we ended up taking the whole block and now provide services and what have you. I was 22 years old when that completed, and I said, you know what? It's time for me to go back to school. Because you see that you can't be what you can't see. And sometimes it's extremely difficult to be something you have never seen in somebody else. Because I was just excited to graduate high school. Because that to me was a great accomplishment. I thought I had made it. I was a young matatán, the one, baby, I was all that plus a bag of tortillas and chips. Okay, don't play. So at age 22, I was in a crossroads. And I said, if I'm going to make it, it's going to take education because I want to make a greater impact. And so this little kid decided to go enroll. Before making that decision, I went back to my native country of Mexico, and I went to go see the village where I was born. There's this little bitty village close to Mexico City called Tepexpan. And I wanted to say to these young kids, I wanted to say, you can do it. You know, if you put your mind to it, you can do anything you want. But that wasn't the reality. Because no matter how brilliant these kids are, these kids would never have the opportunity that this country allows as an opportunity of an education. Because some of them were brilliant, but their poverty was so extreme that no matter how smart they would never have the opportunity that I have. So I left my excuses to the side and I went to go enroll at Mountain View Community College. And everybody said, oh, when you going to that high top? Like, I'm going to talk about me all you want. I'm going to make it one day. I don't know where I'm going to make it to, but I'm going to make it. Because I learned that education is the greatest weapon that I had to fight poverty. So while working 40 hours a week, I worked at AT&T as a dispatcher from 5 p.m. to 4 in the morning. Then I would go to school from 8 a.m. to 12:30. And this little kid, who, y'all, by the way, I flunked every entry, that AccuPlacer, yeah, that was me. That was me. I was that AccuPlacer kid that flunked math, reading, and writing. And I said, oh man, I wasn't really that bad. I don't flunk reading. I said, but anyway, I'm sorry. So I said, you know what, nothing can stop me, because I found when I went to Mexico City, I found what is called my logo. My logo was my meaning. I don't know how many of you all have read the book, Man's Search for Meaning by Dr. Frankl. It's about giving your purpose a pain, and that it will continue to hurt you until you find that thing that you devote to, and you turn your pain into a purpose, and no longer does it stops hurting you as much. Yes, it still hurts, but not as much when you start giving it and channeling your pain. So here I was, and although I had flunked every entry-level exam, this little kid made it. And at this time, I was supporting my elderly mother who had to retire because of her health, and from working housekeeping her entire life. And I went to school 2 years, and 2 years at Mountain View Community College. And then when I graduated, I wanted to go to this little school called SMU. But then they told me how much it was, and I said, oh. And it was May of 2004, and I had no money to go to that school. And I said, Mom, I know we may not have money, but we're gonna work that corner. Even if I have to sell pineapple turnover cakes, tortillas, tacos, whatever, we're going to diversify yes, we're going to get everybody. So I said, whatever I have to do, I will stand in the corner if I have to and beg for my education, but I will go to SMU. Because when I was a little kid at Ignacio Zaragoza, they invited other little brown kids to go to SMU to go dance for Cinco de Mayo. Man, this is a beautiful campus. Like, man, this is beautiful. Then I realized, how much it was to go there, and I'm like, oh, maybe this is not meant for me. But I still remember that little kid going and dancing for Cinco de Mayo. And here we are, fast forward into 2004. It was May of 2004, and I had no money. And then I received a call by this little foundation called the Jack and Cook Foundation. And they said, I received a call from Dr. Ammerman, the president of my community college, and she said, hello, Raul. She can say Raul, it's okay, Raul. She said, hello, Raul, just wanted to, she's a French lady, and she said, just wanted to let you know that you've just been selected to receive the Jack and Cook Scholarship. Ooh, y'all should have seen me. Oh, I started doing headshot. I can't. No, I'm sorry. Y'all, I literally. Have you ever done that ugly cry? I'm not talking about that cute. No. I'm talking about that ugly cry where everything just be hanging like, oh. Y'all, I literally fell to the ground and my mom said, "Mijo, ¿quién se murió?" She's like, "Baby, who died?" She said, "Mom, you don't understand. You don't understand. You have no idea what just happened." She said, "Mijo, what? ¿Qué pasó?" And I said, "Mom, I just got $60,000 a year to go to any school I wanted to in the world. Got accepted to Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Oxford, to any school I wanted to in the world." Y'all better clap for that. Y'all know how hard that was. And then I received another call from the White House saying, "Young man, you're about to receive the U.S. Congressional Award Gold Medal for all of your service to your community." Who would have ever imagined that this kid, who was destined to belong in a crack house, would end up at the White House? Woo! You see, I found my why. And so, although I got accepted to all these schools, SMU called me and said, "We'll give you an additional full ride scholarship." And I said, "I'm going to SMU, y'all." And I ended up going to SMU, and you see, at that time, I was supporting my sister, and I had to make a difficult choice. Was it going to be my job? Because I could no longer go to school full-time and go to school and work full-time, because they weren't as flexible with my schedule as a community college. And so I was able to make it 2 months. And then after that second month, come October, my mom, my sister, and I had nowhere to stay. So we ended up living in a homeless shelter. The irony is it was that same shelter that I helped build, called The Refuge. Who would have ever imagined that this kid would end up being the one that needed that service? And I met somebody at that homeless shelter that said to me, "You are all one slip away from being homeless." And I said, "Bob, what do you mean by that?" He said, "We're all one slip away when you get that slip of paper saying that that person you love just filed a divorce and took everything with them. Or that piece of paper saying that you've been diagnosed with a terminal illness and you use all your money and you're left in the streets." And there I was living in a homeless shelter, traveling every day to SMU and being reminded of my poverty, the trauma of poverty. And I smiled really big because I didn't want I was ashamed of being homeless. And it wasn't until Dr. Maria Dixon, one of my professors, she said, "Baby, what's wrong? I see you've been coming to school and you look really skinny." I said, "Nothing, Dr. Dixon, nothing, I'm fine." She said, "Well, I'm coming to your house." And that's how she found out that I was homeless and had not eaten. That my mom and I were eating whatever we had. Cereal, whatever we could find. So all of my professors at SMU gathered boxes and canned goods, and every month they would give me food so my mom, my sister, and I would be able to eat. And it was November. One of those Novembers, I cried myself to sleep in my bed. And I was saying, "I can't make it anymore. I can't. This is too hard. This is too hard. I can't make it." And then somebody came knocking on my door. And it was this lady who worked as a maid. She said, "Baby, I felt something in my spirit to come and just give you some words of encouragement. And I also brought you some food." Here's this lady who probably is barely making it herself, waiting in front of my door saying, "If you make it, we all make it." Because it is the we over me. It is about the collective impact. Don't you dare quit. And this little kid found another burst of energy, said, "You know what? I may be able to homeless, but my circumstances does not define me. I refuse for my circumstances to define who I am." So there I was, and I held my head up high. I said, "I may be poor, I may have walked to SMU, but I will graduate." And this young man in 2006 walked across that stage, proud, saying, "We made it. We made it, and I'm bringing everybody with me." You see, because if I make it, you're going to make it too. I'm bringing everybody with me. And then the most craziest thing happened, and actually for that, y'all is going to take another speech. But the importance of finding our why is because of this moments like this. If I had to live it all over again, don't wait till you become homeless to be able to care about an issue. Because it may be you one day. Actually, it may have been you. Because y'all, I know we do a great job of smiling and we carry our Louis Vuitton and our Prada bag. But baby, behind all of that, there's a story behind every one of us. And one of the things that my kids have taught me as I continue to go around the world is that pain does not discriminate against your color and your bank account. We all will experience pain in our lives. Some do a better job of hiding it. And let me tell you, it found a lot of courage for me to be able to share my story. But I began to share it. I started sharing it because I hope that people find healing in their own lives as a result of mine saying that old brown, broke Mexican man could make it. I know that I can. And you start removing all the obstacles and the things that you've ever done, the things, the excuses that we make in life. So here we are. And they asked me, who do you think you are, Mateo? Who do y'all think you are thinking that y'all gonna build this shelter? And just tell them, you don't know us. Go ahead and say it. You don't know us. It's all right. Tell your neighbor. Tell somebody next to you. It's like, you don't know me. Oh, some of y'all like, okay, I don't do that. And another thing that my students shared with me, they shared with me just one last thing. Just they're like, oh, we lost track of time. I know. One last thing that I'm going to share with you is I'm going to share with you, and this is something we're going to need as we continue this journey of building this shelter for our unsheltered youth. Because y'all, no good deed ever goes unpunished. For those of y'all that are in public service, y'all understand. Some of y'all that are trying to do good in life know that nothing comes without a price. And you're going to need this. And I learned it from our Woodrow Wilson High School students. And with this, I'm going to close, but you're going to need this one day. So I was speaking to a group. After I finished speaking, I went to Woodrow Wilson High School, and I had all the students with special needs meet me up at the library. And I said, young people, thank you for being my inspiration. Thank you for being my greatest inspiration. And they looked at me like some of y'all are looking at me right now like, what? He said, can you hear me? And I said, and then this young lady who is deaf, she raised her hand in a sign language. She said something to me, and I had an interpreter beside me saying what she was saying, interpreting what she was saying. And this young lady asked the question, Mr. Magdaleno, what do you mean we inspire you, sir? Look at us. Look at everybody in this library. We're the broken kids. We're the kids that everybody makes fun of in lunchtime. We're the kids that nobody ever wants to eat with. Look at us. We're the crippled. We're the unwanted of the school. What do you mean? We inspire you, sir. And I said, you all inspire me because you learn to work with what you have. And then this young lady would do something that will mess me up for a lifetime. She began to say this in sign language. And you all, actually, can y'all do this with me just really quickly? Just do this with me, everybody do this with me. Y'all got really nervous. I thought she was cussing me out in sign language. And as a lady interpreter, she just said, she was laughing. I'm like, what are they saying? What are they saying, lady interpreter? And what this young lady was saying to me, and by the way, she got everybody to start doing, like, they even did the nene with it. I'm like, what? What are they saying? They were saying, work it, baby. Work it, baby. Everybody say, work it, baby. Show me how to work it, baby. You see? That is how I made it in life. I learned how to work it, baby. Okay, I know it's Monday. I know. You learn how to what? Work it, baby. And that's what we're going to do today. You see, sometimes we focus on what we don't have instead of focusing on what we do have. We focus on who left rather than who stayed. So today, y'all just thought y'all were coming for an information session. Today we're going to leave out of here. So anytime we feel discouraged and say, you know what, this is harder, we're passing it by the board of trustees, you would think it would be easy, but You thought it was going to be easy, that this was going to be an easy task, but whenever you want to feel sorry about yourself, you better. No, hold on, y'all. Y'all got it down. You got to learn how to what? Okay, just wanted to do a check. All right. And with that, we're going to learn how to work it, baby. With our distinguished panelists that I'm going to invite to stage at this time. And by the way, y'all, this is a transition. So I already told y'all my why. Now I want y'all to tell somebody you don't know your why. You ain't got to tell them your whole life story, but just tell them, you know what, the reason that this is important to me is because. So go ahead and talk to somebody, and we're going to get this panel transition. So go ahead and talk, and it has to be somebody you don't know. So go ahead and talk to each other. And I'm going to ask all the panelists to join me on stage. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin. I know y'all are deep in conversation. We can continue telling our why story afterwards. I'm wearing a different hat, y'all, so I should pretend I'm a different person. I'm Devon Delano, and I'm glad to serve as your moderator this morning. We have, and I just want y'all to point, I'm just going to point this out, y'all. Y'all notice that all the people that were speakers this morning were all men, including myself. But this is a habit. You know, all these incredible women, like, okay, that's great for you to dream about it, we're going to make it happen. And I love my women. Y'all give yourselves a hand. Yeah, y'all can be proud. No, y'all can do better than that, because if you don't give yourself, nobody else will. Okay, awesome. So what we're going to do is, in your program book, you have the bio of most of the people. But we are so delighted that we actually have, we've had several people join us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from that side to this side. I'm going to have everybody briefly introduce themselves, their name, their title, and then we're going to go deeper into the discussion. So, Bill.
Good morning, everyone, and you heard from me early this morning, but I'm Hillary Evans, and I'm Executive Director of After to Educate.
Hello, I'm Ashley Lynn, and I'm the CEO of Promise House. Good morning, I'm Sherry Christian. I'm the Assistant Superintendent for Student Services with Dallas ISD, and I'm actually representing Trustee Bernadette Nuttall from our school board.
Good morning, I'm Madeline Reedy, and I am the Senior Director of the Track Program for City Square. Good morning, my name is Dr. Amy Wright, and I am the Director of Evaluation over at CORE at SMU.
Good morning, my name is Miguel Solis. I serve as President of the Latino Center for Leadership Development, and I'm also a school board member for the Dallas Independent School District.
Tony Fleo, CEO of Social Venture Partners, and I need someone to take a photo that I'm actually worthy enough to be on a panel with Miguel Solis. This is like one of the most exciting things in my career.
Tony, I was thinking the same thing. So let's dive right into it. So Jimmy, first and foremost, I know that there's a lot of, and I'm going to transition just a little bit. I know that there's been a lot of talk about sheltered and unsheltered, unsheltered and homeless, I'm sorry. Can you break that down just for the sake of the discussion today? What is the difference between homeless students and unsheltered? Because I know it's going to be used a lot during the panel. I want to make sure that we clarify that.
Sure, that's an excellent question. And sometimes when we talk, we forget that not everybody knows. But under the Kenny-Beno, the federal law that provides definitions of homelessness, it's really broad. And so when we're talking about unsheltered youth, we're talking about youth that lack any type of shelter. They're living out of their car, they're living under a bridge. Whereas when we're talking about homeless, it's a broader, so it could be more couch surfing or living in a motel. So I think we could, I don't want to go granular today, I think I want to paint broad strokes, so hopefully that gives everybody a broad stroke.
So thank you. And could we actually, before, and actually, Tony, actually, this is going to be directed to you. So, Tony, tell us about, so now what we're going to do, we're going to just paint a picture of all the different players and how this collaborative works like. And so I know you explained a little bit about SVP's involvement. And do you mind going a little bit more into detail about the involvement?
So some wonderful things collided, Trustee Nuttall brought together some nonprofits, and SVP kind of played a role in helping with EISD to bring together some nonprofits that were playing in the same space of doing different services, and we just brought everybody around the table and had the conversation about who's doing what and for what population, and started the conversations around that. The secret to, I think, really what made it work was that we were able to provide for a full-time person whose job was to bring all of the nonprofits that are working in different areas, select maybe best in class and some other folks who are pretty stellar in the field, and hire Hillary to kind of drive the whole collaborative forward. Because as you know, each nonprofit, SVP certainly all of the different organizations have their own agenda that they're trying to run, and staff is very short. So it's helpful to have somebody whose full-time job it is to bring everybody together, driving to the same conclusions.
Thank you, Tony. And may I add, Hillary, you've been doing an amazing job, y'all. Let's give it up for Hillary. So, Sherry, talk to us a little bit about the what does this mean, and what is the involvement of Dallas ISD?
Okay. So just to give you a little background, this is something that we've been tackling for a while with our students, and we have been looking at our unaccompanied youth, because when we say unaccompanied, that means these are children that are on their own. They don't have family with them, they're just out there trying to survive, so they may be sleeping on a friend's couch at night, they may be sleeping on a park bench, they may find an abandoned car, an abandoned building, so they're pretty much just on their own. So as a district, we had started a few different programs, one being drop-in centers at some of our high school with them. They're just out there trying to survive, so they may be sleeping on a friend's couch at night, they may be sleeping on a park bench, they may find an abandoned car, an abandoned building, so they're pretty much just on their own. So as a district, we had started a few different programs, one being drop-in centers at some of our high schools, where students would come in the mornings, get a hot meal, talk to someone about some possible services that they might hook up with, but just trying to get kids connected to things that we could get them connected to. And so as we were having these conversations and going to meetings and talking to people, we just kept being asked over and over, what do you all need from us as a community? What do you need? And we kept saying, we need more beds. Promise House is full. The other shelters, when we call them, they're full. Now, they'll work with us. They'll get the kids in on an emergency basis, but they just could not provide long-term services for our kids because everything was full. So as we started having these conversations, Trustee Nuttall came to me and said, I understand you all are out talking about the fact that you need beds. Well, I think I found a solution. If we come up with a building, there's a group of individuals that want to help us and want to support us. So that's when we took a tour. We got the group together, we had a meeting, we took a tour of some of our buildings in the district, and we found a location near Fair Park that used to be a school, and it was a central facility, and luckily had not had too much vandalism since it had been boarded up. And so we all agreed this was the place, and from there we just took off running with it. And like has been mentioned, our board supported us. We were so excited because, we provided all of the information, all of the details around how we could make this work, how this partnership could thrive, how we could serve our kids, serve our community, and just be a blessing. So we just took off from there, and that's where we've gotten to at this point. So now the work begins.
Well, thank you for all the incredible work that you've been doing for so long. Thank you, Sherry. So we also have Dr. Lynn, and for those, just as a reminder, she's our CEO of Promise House that have been doing this for a long time. So Dr. Lynn, can you share just a little bit about the overall data about the youth homelessness in the city that account for these youth who are not identified themselves as homeless, even though they fall under the federal definition of being homeless? And also a lot of questions, are they underreported? So how do we gather our heads around them?
Sure. There's a number of ways that the city has tried to accumulate the data, and some of it is through DISD, and some of that is through the point-in-time count. However, we're very clear that the numbers that we've collected thus far have not been accurate in collecting the full scope of the issue. Last year and the previous year, there's a big discrepancy in the numbers. So the previous year was 1,200. Last year reflected 800 children on the street in Dallas at any given night. However, Promise House can attest to the fact that there are many more kids that are not being reported. And these kids are working very hard to fly under the radar. They don't want people to identify them as homeless. They're afraid they will end up in Child Protective Services or in jail or in trouble in some way. Or some of them are not interested in becoming involved in the system. They honor their freedom, and it's of concern to them that they be counted in these numbers. Later on in the program, Promise House is connecting with Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance to do a youth point-in-time count, which has not previously been done on its own as an endeavor to go out and identify the kids with questionnaires over the course of several days. So Josh will be here later in this program to talk to you about the specifics of that, but our goal is to get a much better and more accurate number of kids that are on the street on any given night.
Thank you, Dr. Lynn. And just from a show of hands, how many of you all are aware of what Promise House does? Okay, so we have most of you. That's awesome. I didn't know. For those of us in the room that may not be familiar, do you mind just telling us briefly what you do and what services you all currently provide?
Sure. Promise House is one of the only organizations here in Dallas that provides emergency youth shelter to children from the age of 0 to 21 who are homeless. Our services include emergency youth shelter, a group home for young girls who are pregnant and parenting. We also have transitional living programs that span up to 2 years. We also work in the drop-in centers with DISD and have an on-campus hospital homebound school for the kids who are in crisis. But in addition to that, we provide an outreach van that goes out and identifies kids that are on the street that may not be ready to come in. We provide them with resources, information, medical referrals, and those sorts of things, and encourage them to come in as necessary. And then for the community members, as a preventative measure, we have parenting classes, we have counseling, and we have crisis intervention and case management for those people who are not residents. We house about 100 kids on any given night through our various programs. And unfortunately, we turn away about 150 kids a month.
Well, thank you for all the work that you do. Thank you. So one last question. I know I have a lot of questions for you, but so what is going to be your involvement in the After Eight? Can you just dive into that, please?
Sure. So our involvement is to serve as the operations component to the residential emergency youth and transitional program within the new structure. So our goal will be to provide 35 beds, 25 of which will be emergency youth shelter, and 10 of which will be a longer-term stay, depending on the child's circumstances. And so we'll provide all the operations associated with ensuring that the licensing requirements and the ethical guidelines and the staffing patterns and CPS regulations are met, and that we're fully staffed and the children receive all the wraparound services that they need while they're in care.
That was amazing. Thank you, Dr. And so the next question we have is for our City Square partner, Madeline. So, in this partnership effort that will be managing the drop-in center, could you please share more about the City Square's, and I want to make sure that I get this correctly, Transition Resource Action Center, and what you're envisioning for the new around-the-clock drop-in center that will be one of the After Eight components.
Sure, yeah, that's great. I'm happy to share. So the Transition Resource Action Center, or TRAC, as some of you might know of it, serves as the youth services arm for City Square. So City Square exists to fight the root causes of poverty through service, advocacy, and friendship. And so TRAC is the way that we do that for young adults under the age of 24. And so I oversee all of our services, and so everything is a one-stop shop. That's what we believe in. So we started in 2003 after a community collaborative very similar to this. There are 25 agencies that came together and said, we are failing children that are in systems of care. So systems of care means foster care, juvenile justice, and all those that coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? And so that's kind of how we started, and that's what we love to do. We don't think that we can do it all by ourselves. We think it takes a village. And so we love things like this. And so our TRAC Center serves as a drop-in center, a resource center, a place for young adults to come and get served under one roof. Because we know that people in crisis have a hard time running around town, right? We also know for young people who are on their own, they have an even harder time because they have no one to navigate those services for them. And so that's why we do what we do and why we do it, how we do it. So our whole hope is to be able to provide this drop-in service center component for After Eight. So like Ashley was talking about, there are some young people that don't want to be reported, correct? And so to have a drop-in center where they can come in and build that rapport and to build that trust that, okay, these people aren't here to hurt me, they're here to help me, is our whole goal, is to be able to do that. So TRAC already does crisis intervention, so we get calls from around the whole North Texas Metroplex because we serve 19 counties, not just Dallas. And we also have a drop-in center in Tarrant County because you don't cross that geographical divide, right? I'm from Dallas, I don't go to Fort Worth. Maybe some of you are similar. Same thing for the kids. They don't want to move from Fort Worth to Dallas either. So we also provide very intensive case management services. So we use a life coaching approach. We believe that we are helping them for tomorrow. So we are coaching them towards that future and that ultimate promise. And so we'll do the same thing at the center. And what we found is that if our goal is self-sufficiency, we know that young people need two things. They need a safe place to live, because how do you get around if you don't know where you're going to stay? So we hope to connect youth to housing programs. So we already are part of what is the youth committee or the youth task force. And we sit on that with Promise House and various other agencies. Some of them are in the room today. And so we know about those referral sources and the open beds and how to get them plugged into those services. We also know that some youth don't want to be in that, and so we help them figure out how do you find a safe place to stay on your own, right? Move them to permanency, that's what we call that. And then we have, so we already have various housing programs, short-term rental assistance, long-term housing, transitional housing for various youth. And then we also know that they need a job. We all need a job. We all have to make money to be able to pay those bills, right? And so we have a very in-depth workforce program that we do. And we are very excited. We just are partnering now with DISD in another realm to do education services. So I have always said, we may fight poverty, but like Mateo said earlier, you don't really fight poverty if you don't increase people's education, right? And so we're very excited about this new initiative that we have. And so that's also on the horizon. So all of that will come together in this drop-in center as well to provide all of those various things. We're hoping that the drop-in center, once we do the design, we'll have laundry facilities, we'll have showers, we'll have a full kitchen, because the young people that I see that drop into track, that's what they need. They have to have a place to go do their laundry. They have to have a place to go grab some food, to take a shower. There are some resources in the community, but they're for adults, and so it's hard for an 18, 19-year-old girl to go there, right? So, or a young man. So, yeah.
Oh, man, talking about work it, baby. Yes. Man, and so thank you for all the incredible work that you do as well. And in education, this is known as teaching the whole child, right? It's not about just addressing their educational needs, but it's hard for you to learn when you're hungry. It's hard for you to learn when you can't find a shelter, or all these different services that all of you provide. So thank you for that. And so now we're going to transition. And by the way, if any of you all have any questions, y'all should either have, we're going to have time for Q&A here in a little bit. Please make sure to jot down your questions, and we're going to have a few minutes for that as well. So as we begin our dialogue and our discussion, please feel free to write down some of the questions, and then we'll be opening that up. So all this is wonderful, but I noticed that in most of the projects that go on, actually across the country, we never evaluate impact. Right, that's like, oh, that's right. Oh, we were so busy fundraising and doing the work that we forget sometimes to do a critical component of the evaluation of the impact. Are we having an impact? And if we're not, it's time to go back to the drawing board and let's be impactful. And so to address that, we are very fortunate to have Dr. Annie Wright, who just told me she's also from Woodrow Wilson. So tell us a little bit about the SMU Core and what involvement is going to have in this After 8 initiative.
Sure, thank you. So CORE, the Center on Research and Evaluation, is housed in the Simmons School of Education and Human Development over at SMU. And we are so glad to be involved in this process from the very beginning and to really be a collaborating partner, because I think too often evaluations and data get used almost as like a accountability hammer at the end of an intervention. But we really prefer and are lucky to be involved throughout the process so that we can use all of the tools that evaluation has to offer in terms of really supporting program development and rollout over time. So just personally, I'm really excited about this topic in particular. My background is in clinical community psychology. So the idea that it takes multiple different partners from multiple different angles working on the same issue is particularly near and dear to me, but of course to all of us at CORE. We work on a lot of out-of-school time programs, trying to really understand the intersection between what's provided in outside of those K-12 walls and how that interacts with what's happening inside the school, and ultimately how that adds up to outcomes for kids. So we plan to approach this evaluation partnership in some ways as we do all others, and that is with a real focus on collaboration and listening to the experts. So those are certainly the folks sitting up here, but also to youth themselves and having a real opportunity for them to be meaningfully engaged, not just in telling us what they need and what works for them, but what they want to see. How do they consider impacts? What would that look like for them? I'll talk briefly about 3 ways that we're going to approach this evaluation, and these 3 strategies are very much inseparable. They're braided together. And so the first one is what we call process evaluation. And this is really just monitoring what happens, right? Monitoring what activities, what interventions are being provided. With multiple partners at the table, that gets exponentially more interesting as we figure out how to track that. But it's critically important because what I've certainly heard, and we've heard this morning, is that we want to sustain this model. We want to scale it, which means that as evaluators on the front end, our job is figuring out how to measure that and document it so that it can be scaled and sustained and really be what I'm hearing is a national model for these kinds of public-private partnerships. The other important piece of process evaluation, though, speaks to the role of evaluation throughout the life cycle of a large-scale intervention like this. And this is that we want to provide information, meaningful information to all of these partners along the way. So instead of waiting several years down the road and documenting this is what happened, we want to engage in formative evaluation. So that's really the second strategy. And that's providing information back quickly and in a useful way so that mid-course corrections can be made. I heard you say, Hillary, right? We're going to figure some stuff out, right? Those doors are not going to open on day one and it's going to run smoothly from the very beginning. There are going to be lessons to be learned and small changes to be made along the way. And so we want the data that's being collected to not just grow stale on the shelf and be used by researchers and funders, but to be really, really valuable.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. So I'm going to ask if some of you have any questions, please begin to line up here in the middle. And then we're going to start taking your questions. Oh, we have note cards. Awesome, even better.
Go ahead
So,
and pass them down.
So there, just pass them down, and we'll be collecting those from you. We'll try to get as many of those answered as possible. Awesome. So my next question is to our trustee, Solis. I was there that night that it was passed, and I was getting all emotional. Like, yes, oh my gosh. Right there where Sherry was being drilled, and it's like, and so what I would like to know from you, Trustee Solis, you've been working with all these students, and what is the importance of something like this for the district from your perspective?
So, Raul, thank you for the question. Thank you also for your personal story. I mean, it continues to inspire me. I mean, I've probably heard it now about 5 or 6 times, but each time it inspires me because, I mean, you're living this experience. You live this experience, and if there's anyone that we can point to say, if we put the resources and the time in place, these kids can succeed, it's you. So thank you for your story and your leadership. The second thing I should say right from the start is that throughout this process, I have been participating in an observatory role. I have not been a participant. Here's the reason why. The vision of George Baldor is not just after aid. The vision of George Baldor is Mercado, which is now a new artisan market on Jefferson Boulevard. It's the Latino Center for Leadership Development, which is the organization I'm proud and honored to lead. And so in order to ensure that I didn't bring any conflict into the process, I stepped away and just watched. There are a lot of credit can be given. I do want to highlight, though, the work that Sherry West has done. You don't hear her name often in the paper. You don't see her on the TV, but I can tell you she is an angel in DISD. For years, she has been doing extremely great work, and that hundreds of thousands of kids have benefited. Can we please give her a round of applause? So very briefly, there are 2 major things I want to point out here, Raul. The first is, this wasn't necessarily the easiest process to get through from a DISD standpoint, and it's not to say that there's anything negative to be said about this. It's just we really have had to have a deep theoretical conversation about the role that Dallas ISD should play in things separate and aside from immediate student achievement. But we also have recognized through this process that, look, there's only so much that we can do in the classroom, but there are so many other issues that our kids face that when they come to the classroom, perhaps could impede student achievement. And so we're beginning to shift the paradigm about the roles that we can play. How can we be collaborative with outside entities? How can we work with other municipal institutions like the city or the housing authority or others to ensure that we can provide as best wraparound services as we can. So that's number one, is shifting the paradigm. The second thing is the power of public-private partnerships. It's already been alluded to a few times now that this is a one-of-a-kind model. There is no other large or small urban school district that is doing this type of work. And the reason why I bring up public-private partnerships is because we've brought the public. DISD has said we are willing to step up to offer this real estate to After Eight and to our partners to ensure that this works. There's a private part too. And that's going to require you. It's going to require people in the community, business leaders, community leaders to step up. This thing will not pay for itself. We're going to have to step up and ensure that we can make the private match this public. And I'm sure that if we do this, it's not just going to work in this one facility. We really can scale this work, not just across the district, but perhaps across the state and the nation as well.
Absolutely, and I've been hearing the nation being brought up, y'all. And by the way, this will be Dallas. We can do it. We said, look, y'all. Let's go ahead and set the tone for the country. Can y'all agree with me? Let's go ahead and do it. Y'all know we go big. We go big or go home, right? So what I'm going to ask, Hillary, if you don't mind, just kind of like, because I know there's probably a replication of questions. So what we're going to do is we're going to just, if you don't mind, just putting them together, and then we'll be addressing some of those questions, and we're going to do our very best to get through as many of them as possible. Is there anything else, you all? I know that there's a lot of questions that have been asked. Is there anything else that is like on your heart, like, this is what I wanted to say? Do y'all want to share something from the panel, just in general, that y'all heard that has not been addressed yet? All right, let's dive right into. So Hillary, can you be my band mic for this morning? Awesome. So Hillary, here you go.
Okay, so the first question that we have is, when do you hope to have the first homeless youth in the facility? So the opening doors question. So we're looking to open our doors next fall, so for the next school year, 2018. We realize that's an aggressive timeline, but in 7 months we've accomplished a lot, so we want to continue the momentum. Okay, so the next question, I think this is two questions. Let's see, what is the major reason or cause for homelessness? And then the second question is, do you anticipate the increase in homelessness related to SB4? And does anyone on the panel want to answer that? I'll take it away. I certainly have.
So when you talk about the cause of homelessness, it's multifaceted, right? It depends on the age bracket that you're looking at. So when you're looking at youth, the major cause of homelessness is either a disruption in their family, right? So like Mateo's story, the family becomes homeless together, right? Or the family learns something about the child and kicks them out. So there's several in our community that have LGBTQ issues that become homeless at a young age, or a young lady like Ashley is parenting and pregnant youth home, become pregnant, and the family doesn't like that and says, well, you have to go. Or there's abuse or neglect in the home and the kids are running from that and they don't want to go home. Home isn't safe for them. The streets are safer, which is kind of scary, right? Those are the big issues. There's lots of others, but those are the biggest ones when you talk about youth homelessness, young adult homelessness. And so in terms of, do we think that homelessness is going to get bigger? I think that Ashley alluded to this earlier when she was talking about the point in time count and the youth count. I think the more assertive we are with our counts, the higher the number goes, but I don't necessarily think that the number has changed. I think that our vision, our ability to capture them has changed, right? So last year, MDHA, the Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance, had the largest group of volunteers ever for their point in time count, and the numbers were large that they were able to see, right? And they were able to go into communities that they've never had people to go in because they never had that many volunteers before, right? So this year, I think we're going to see the same thing with the youth count. So we'll see more homeless youth because we have more volunteers, more manpower on the ground, right? I think that there's always the opportunity for legislation to impact homelessness, whether that is to drive it up or down. Is there anyone else that had other thoughts?
So we'll take another question. So I think these two questions were asking about the number that I think Ashley discussed in her remarks about the number of 800 homeless children on the street, and what that exactly is, if you could kind of flesh that out a little more.
I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail because I think Josh will cover some of this in a moment regarding the point in time count. However, that number is from the Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance point in time count. That includes kids who are in shelters or who are on the street, and could also incorporate those individuals who are homeless with their family. So it is very broad, and it's hard to really distinguish what is what in terms of the need, given that number. And so that's why this year Promise House is partnering with Metro Dallas Homeless Alliance to really drill down on that number so that we have some clarity about where the need is, how best to serve, what the intervention strategies will be. Great question.
There are also, I think, a few questions in here that talk kind of about the legalities. And I think that would be a good segue to also give a shout out to our After 8 lawyer, Jonathan Blum, if he's still here, from Pulcinelli. And we really appreciate all of the, Jonathan, this has really been something that, in terms of the collaboration, where it's not, it's been difficult to all get on the same page, but at the same time, I think that when you have the partners up here that are willing to work and really see the end, our shared goal in this, I think that we are getting there, and I think with the recent board vote is evidence of that. But I think Sherry and I can kind of piggyback, too, but one of the questions from the audience is, what are the stipulations with the agreement for the school that's being used for the program? And I think this is kind of just a general question about the agreement between After 8 and the school district.
Okay, so for the district's part, we are supplying the building. We will supply any maintenance needs that go along with the building once the building is completed, the restructuring and getting the building back up and ready to open for this event. So once that's completed, then we'll take over the maintenance. We will have custodians and security during the normal operating hours that the district is in session. And in the evenings, when we have to step out because of legality issues, because we cannot house students overnight, that's when Promise House and After 8 group will step in City Square, and they would basically take over the building and run it in the evening until the following morning, and then at that time we would take it over. So those were a lot of the things that we had to go back and forth with our attorneys, with After 8 attorneys, to flesh all of that out. But basically, we run the building during normal business hours that school is in session, and then after that, we turn it over to those that have the authority to run a program like this after hours.
Sherry, I'm going to stick with you. This is a somewhat different question, but still, I think, related to DISD and how the district identifies students who could benefit from After 8.
So in general, residential services are governed by certain regulations. So we are bound to those regulations according to how we're certified and whether Child Protective Services is involved in those sorts of things. So in general, we have 72 hours to contact a guardian to get consent for continued stay. If the guardian does not consent or we are not able to get in touch with them, or there's reason to believe that there's cause to notify Child Protective Services, then it becomes their authorization to allow the child to stay for a longer period of time. And oftentimes that is the case. Either we're unable to contact a guardian or the guardian does not want to have anything to do with the care of the child. And so then we turn it over to Child Protective Services, and then we're governed by those regulations. So the emergency youth shelter component, generally those kids will be there 3 to 4 months as we work either on reunification or identifying a longer-term placement and stable housing for those kids and doing crisis intervention. The transitional living component, which will be a smaller piece, will allow for some of those kids to move over into a longer length of stay, and typically that length of stay is up to 2 years. Because of the size of this shelter, we're going to really need to look at how best to utilize these services and the turnover rate and make sure that we're being good stewards of this project and make sure that we're serving as many kids as we can to the best of our ability. So that's going to be something that I think the research will help us with, and we'll continue to evaluate that, but staying within our regulations.
And thank you everyone for your questions. Probably I'll be able to address 2 of them, but please feel free to stay afterwards, and we'll be more than glad to answer some of the questions that you may have.
I think that the next grouping of questions really are about the types of services that After Eight and that the After Eight partners will be providing at the facility. And so I think that speaking about the types of social services, that's something that we will be working through, and that is really the purpose of this particular event, to for those service providers that are in the audience, that this is, let's say that you have a mentoring or life coaching or community garden that you think could be a beneficial service for this facility, to be able to plug in, and we'll get to the engagement portion of our program shortly. But we want to hear from you, because I think that those types of services are ones that we will be looking for within After Eight. One of the questions that we had, another question is, will students attend classes at the shelter or other campuses? Sherry or Ashley, want to speak to that?
Okay, so for the majority of the kids, they will go to their home schools because we don't want to cause disruption for the students. So right now we provide transportation for students back to what's considered their home school. So they will have transportation to go to their school of choice, or if we want to pick a school that's near the facility, if some of the kids feel like that's better for them, that since this is somewhere that they will call their home base, we will allow them to transfer to a school that's near the facility. But for most purposes, all of the kids will go back to one of our comprehensive high schools.
And I think this is another kind of a theme of questions of what about the non-DISD students and what types of services would be offered to them at this facility. And I want to, I guess, first direct it to Madeline, and then we can come back to Sherry. But with our drop-in centers.
I expect that a lot of the young people that use the drop-in center will be unconnected, disconnected youth, right? That's the likely ones, the ones that will be able to easily plug into the shelter, the ones that DISD has already identified through their already existing drop-in centers. And so I think what we hope to do is to be able to encourage young people to go back to school. We already have a history of working with youth that are not connected to a school. If I look at TRAC's intake forms where we gather data about the young people that come through our doors, close to 50% of them do not have their GED or high school diploma and are not attending school at this time. So that's out of 800 kids a year. That's a large number, right? And so we already have a history of this, of helping them set goals around their education and plugging them into DISD's recovery programs, or getting them enrolled in high school, figuring out where their lost transcripts are, piecing together their education. I know Promise House already does this with the kids in their shelter as well. And so, I mean, there will be a lot of work to enroll young people who've been out of school for a while into this, but We also have lots of connections with various GED programs for those young people that don't think that they want to go back to high school. DISD has opportunities for them internally, but there's also external programs as well that we can plug them into. And then there's lots of programs at the community college level. And so I think that as Hillary alluded to this, it's going to take more than just us sitting up here to make this happen, right? There's going to need to be beds in the community. There's going to need to be programs in the community that come in and help meet these needs. So did that answer the question?
And I just want to add that one of the outcomes or things that After Eight wants to establish is a steering committee where we can have community stakeholders and leaders be able to serve in an advisory capacity and be able to help guide us through the implementation of services. And I think that it's really important for us on the steering committee to have a youth, a part of the committee or someone that has experienced homelessness so that when we're looking at these services that we are really looking at them in the most comprehensive way. So I think, let's see, sure.
So that you guys have some clarity about where we'll start with services. We have the benefit of 33 years plus of current services being offered. So Promise House already provides counseling and LGBT services and trafficking and parenting, and all of those services will be moved over to this program as well, in addition to what the community can bring forward. So we're hoping to make this even better. But as a base, we'll have a wide array of services that the kids can benefit from the start.
And thank you. And you all, our time has actually come. So I want to thank all of our distinguished panelists for joining us today, this morning, and give us more insight of what this program is and the need for this program. So thank you, each and every one of you. And we're going to transition to the next part of our program, which Hillary will take us there. Thank you again to our panelists. And everybody, please stand up, stretch a little. We're going to reset. I'm going to hit the reset button. So everybody, please stand to stretch a little, do a little dance if you want to do a little Monday morning dance. All right. Thank you. Sorry. Now, Hillary.